Good morning, everybody. My name's Adam Bryan. I am the Chief Executive of the South East LEP. Just wanted to say really a great big thanks from us for your time this morning, for your time over the next couple of hours as we talk about the fantastic opportunities that the major projects that are planned across our area will bring, particularly around the area of skills. We're indebted to a range of fantastic speakers. And it should be a really information-packed and interesting morning. I hope you get a lot out of it. Myself and my team are on hand today and into the future to help connect you up with many of the people that you'll hear from today. I hope you have a great couple of hours. I'm sure it'll run really well. And it gives me great pleasure to hand over now to my chairman, the chairman of the South East LEP Enterprise Partnership, Christian Brodie. Thank you, Chris.
Adam, thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this South East LEP Major Skills webinar. Across our region, we are set for a period of unprecedented growth, from significant housing numbers to new free ports, and keeping goods and people moving through what will be one of the largest tunnels in the world. There's a huge amount ahead. As a LEP, we established a major projects group some time ago. And it's fast become clear that one of the most pressing issues for us is to work collaboratively on our skills and employment. Collectively, our major projects will offer a range of opportunities and at scale. We have therefore set up a skills subgroup, bringing together skills colleagues from the projects and to enable shared learning and actions. We've also commissioned a report to look at where certain skills may be needed at particular times, or where there may be more pressure on certain job types, and you'll hear more about that shortly. Fundamentally, as we enter a recovery phase and move forward from the significant challenges of the pandemic, we are fortunate to have such a range of opportunities ahead, and it is through working together that we will realize the most benefit for our local communities. We're very pleased to be working with the projects, and I'd like to thank them for their supportive and collaborative approach, and for joining us today to share more information about what's ahead for them. A quick note before we start. The colleagues here today are leading on the skills aspect of work. Questions should therefore be around skills and employment. If there are other areas of interest, we'd be happy to capture these and get responses for circulation after the event. It's also worth noting the projects are at different stages and consents, and so we'll have different levels of detail to share. Our intention today is to share some of the key information and headlines across the projects, as there's a huge level of interest in them. We anticipate running similar sessions on a regular basis so that we can keep you up to speed and you can continue to engage and pose questions. When we get to the panel session, you will be able to ask questions via the Q&A, and you can upvote for existing questions if it's something you'd like to particularly covered too. So, onto the webinar, and I'd like to first introduce CELEP Skills Lead, Louise Aitken, who will talk a little bit about CELEP Skills work. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you very much for that introduction. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so if you can let me know that you're able to see that okay, and I shall talk through just a few slides. So hopefully, are you able to see that okay? No?
Yes.
Yes?
Yep, I think
okay.
so, yep.
Okay, if you just bear with me. Okay, so you can see PowerPoint there.
Yep.
Okay, so just to let you know that we have a skills advisory panel that is employer-led as a LEP, and this is working alongside the major projects and the skills group for the major projects. So the skills advisory panels exist across the country, so all LEPs now have one of those. We're supported by the Department for Education to produce regular information, labour market information. Ours is chaired by Helen Clements of Morgan Sindall, so there's obviously a strong construction sector across our region, and it also includes further education, higher education and provider representation. So that group really has a golden thread now through to our major projects skills group and works in alignment with it. And one of the things that that group has done recently is to produce a skills report. So if you anything you want to know really about what we've been doing on skills and what we will be doing on skills as a LEP and with our partners is within this report. And that also includes an awful lot of data and evidence. So there will be an executive summary also coming soon, but there's a link there that we'll share afterwards for you to be able to see kind of what that includes, and we'll share that. And there's also a section in there on our major projects and the planned research that we'll come on to shortly. So within that, we have a vision and priorities. And as we work with our major projects, that's obviously something we would want to work in alignment with. We have recently updated that and reviewed it as part of producing that skills report. And we've added a commitment to clean growth, for example, as is underlined, and the inclusive economy. But by and large, I won't read all of these out because time is precious today, but by and large, these are our headline priorities. So things like increasing our apprenticeships, raising awareness of the jobs and growth across our area, building a diverse and inclusive economy. So they're the headlines in terms of what we're doing. And we've also recently reviewed what we said were our priorities. So we looked at things like our skills levels, benefit claimants, and also with a view of how COVID has impacted on those things. And by and large, we found that they were all still really high priorities, and in some cases more so, because obviously COVID has impacted significantly on things like our out of work benefits. And we also experience a shortage of tutors. So there's a challenge in recruiting to tutors, particularly in our subject areas aligned to growth. In terms of what we're already doing about some of that, and the skills report goes into more detail, but we have committed nearly 70 million of capital investment into a range of facilities across the CELEP area. Over £80 million worth of European social funding, including a recent call for tender around supporting young people into employment. We produce a lot of research and evidence now that's widely available and that we've started to publish. In order to address that tutor shortage, we have recently had a tutor bursary programme, and there's a becomealecturer.org website that's available as well to tackle that. And we're also a digital skills partnership area, which is led by Jim Wilkinson and my team, and is in its third year now, working with the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And we recently launched a website really to bring together all of that key information that we've been gathering and to make sure it's as open and accessible as possible. And that does include a major projects section now. So we'll be adding to that regularly, working with colleagues, and there's more and more resources coming through all the time. So that plus a lot else is going on that website, and it's very much a resource for the area. So we do encourage partners to share their information. And we will be developing an action plan, a shared action plan with the major projects to look at some of the sort of key things that we would want to work on together. But we're also looking at how we build on existing work. So absolutely integrating with things like the new Restart programme that DWP are launching. We have a range of European social funded projects delivering across the patch. So for example, Mainstream have got something about supporting people in employment. There's an apprenticeship programme in East Sussex. So linking in with all of those will be important, as is working with existing STEM ambassadors, encouraging more STEM ambassadors, more enterprise advisors and governors in schools. And then there are a range of organisations that we already work with that it makes sense for us to do more with, such as Career Ready, Career Colleges Trust, Go Construct and Women into Construction. And then just playing our part in things like raising awareness of disability confidence and encouraging more participation in that. And finally, just some headlines in terms of looking ahead. We have a £4.4 million COVID recovery fund that is now starting to deliver for support for individuals and businesses. We do have a webinar tomorrow that will share more information, and we'll share more on our website very soon. We're also planning a skills festival on the 19th and 21st of October through a virtual platform, and so that will be a really good opportunity for us to share some of the opportunities coming through the major projects and with our wider employer networks. And we're also, as I said, building a shared action plan, and there's a report being produced by MACE that will give us a really good overview of what the projects collectively are needing, and from that we will be able to develop that action plan and work with partners here today to deliver against that, which is probably a good segue into the next agenda item, I think, and I shall stop sharing my screen at that point.
Great, many thanks, Louise. And it's clear what a big opportunity the projects represent. I'm now pleased to hand over to Richard Dinsdale from MACE Group, who are undertaking research into the collective skills and employment needs across the projects. Over to you, Richard.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Chris. And thanks, Amy, for flying the machine. I wouldn't trust myself to do it myself. Yes, so I guess next slide, please, Amy. Yeah, so, the commission, we need to understand what all those major projects are. We need to understand where they are, how they sit in that demographic. There's a great point that Louise just made, 155,000 people on benefits right now. Where are those projects and how could they really support communities into jobs and into careers? So we're looking at demographics. We're understanding that required future workforce requirements, and I've got some headline figures that I can share with you soon. And of course, very important that whilst we look at the demand for skills, it's created by not just a series of, maybe 8 or so major projects, but a number of others of significance that we then look at how that gap emerges between what's needed and what's provided at the moment. And then from that, we're looking to develop a series of recommendations as to how to kind of bridge the gap between current supply and future demand. Next slide, please. So, just a very quick rattle through. I don't want to steal any of my colleagues' thunders. Some of those key projects, the London Resort. Next slide, please. Lower Thames Crossing, we've got a wonderful kind of parallel project going on looking at benefits maximisation around the LTC. Next slide, please. Ebbsfleet Garden City, we've had some super conversations with Laura, who's talking about that today. Next slide, please. Freeports, we've met with Vivid Economics on behalf of Thames Freeports and Anita Thornbury on behalf of Felixstowe and Harwich. Next slide, please. Bradwell, of course, and recently talked this through with Kate from Bradwell Station. Next slide, please. Public Health England, significant move to Harlow. Next slide, please. And of course, the Hoo Peninsula, 12,000 new homes there. So I think that's the last of those slides. Next one, please. Alongside those, there are another number of significant projects. And if you're talking about how to meet that sort of overall demand for housing across the region, there's some significant stuff that needs doing there. So how are we going to do it? Well, we are deeply immersed in that process of reviewing each project. We've had one-to-one dialogue with all the project leads, and we're starting to build that entire picture. We've been looking at construction programs and project value and delivery timescales. And it's really important that in looking at skills, we don't just look at construction skills, but we look at everything that's needed to bring a project forward. Pre-construction, the construction process itself, what's then needed to maintain that facility, and of course, what's needed to operate. So we are looking at each of those stages. Then it's a case of looking at what skills are specifically required to deliver each of those stages. So we are breaking it down into a series of job families. And then using those metrics to establish job numbers of each type. We will then produce a desktop skills report, and we will summarize the skills required by year. And again, hopefully, if this slide deck's the right one, we have some headline figures in there about numbers needed going forwards. We have also, but I don't share it here, separated those numbers into sub-regions so that we can look locally at what's needed in East Sussex, what's needed in sort of South Kent, North Kent, South Essex, North Essex. And of course, there's something of a greater depth of analysis on the projects. Next slide, please. So very quickly, this is just how we did it. We know, as both Chris and Louise said, that projects are at various stages of maturation around understanding skills and jobs. We're working with that, and where we haven't got specific data, we're obviously using industry best practice understanding, CITB's kind of workforce projection toolkits and so on and so forth to bridge the gap. Next slide, please. Timescales. We've kept these arbitrary. Timescales sometimes can be quite sensitive, especially with major projects. So, we're not necessarily sort of defining here start and finish dates for anything. But, this is the kind of the process that we're running through for those 8 major projects. When they start, when they finish, and then we can map skills against it. Next slide, please. And of course, it's not just, as I said, construction, but it's operation. And of course, looking at that sort of full life cycle of a project, both from operational staff required to bring these projects to life, but also the facilities management and maintenance aspects that keep these projects safe and healthy. Next slide, please. And just as a very kind of notional example, looking at what would be needed in the London resort in terms of, project management, architectural, range of consultants, finance support, engineers, leading up to the point where the project goes on site, then who is engaged in bringing that construction process forward, how much is on site, how much is off site, how much is using modern methods of engineering, modern methods of construction, and modern methods of manufacturing. And then, of course, once we get into opening the doors and having a wonderful cohorts of people coming through, what is that staff base like that makes the London resort a world-class place to visit? Next slide, please. Skill supply is the other side of the equation. So whilst we're doing a vast amount of work understanding what that sort of skills demand is, at the same time, we are reviewing the way that skills are delivered right now. We've obviously done a lot of work in the past with Essex County Council around skills planning. We've done masses of work and are doing lots of work around hydrogen and delivering a decarbonised economy. We supported the Thames Estuary Growth Board at the early stages of their programme, and we're deeply immersed in the Free Ports programme. So we understand, precisely what is required across a range of sectors, but what we must do is make sure that we have systems in place to kind of meet that that significant demand. Next slide, please. Core Projects Programme, again, nothing necessarily too tight in the way of defined start and finish dates, but just giving you a sort of a flavour of how things would sort of emerge across the various projects that we're looking at here. Next slide, please. And some sense of what this means in terms of projected job requirements. On the right-hand side of the slide, in bold, we've got the projects that form that sort of core of major projects: Ebbsfleet, London Resort, Hoop Peninsula, Lower Thames Crossing, Public Health's relocation, the 2 free ports, forgive me, not just the Thames Estuary one, and of course Bradwell. Looking, as we have done to date, at the figures that are emerging, you will see on the left-hand side there some sense of the scale of demand that is getting created here. By 2025 through to 2028, getting on to 100,000 job requirements. And this isn't kind of business as usual. Business as usual will just keep on doing what it does. But to meet the demands of these major and significant projects, 100,000 more people brought into employment. I guess the way to look at that is to just double back against what Louise highlighted, 155,000 people on benefits. If we could take that, a significant cohort of those people and bring them into gainful employment and a career, then taking a standard kind of benefit figure, multiplying that by 52 and taking that by 155,000, we could be putting a 2.1 billion a year pounds per annum saving into the cost of supporting folk. Next slide, please. Just a quick mention around hydrogen and decarbonisation. As I say, I think this is an absolute game changer, not just for the region, but for the whole of the UK. I've just come off a call with a facility up in the northeast at Blyth, looking at the future of offshore wind, looking purely at innovation and looking at how we can secure some funds for that. But that shift to a decarbonised economy will have a fundamental effect on the way jobs are kind of lined up, and altogether different way of working. The one thing I would say, and this is a conversation that we've had with both Lower Thames Crossing and with folk in hydrogen, that if we all want to get really rich quick, we should become pipe welders. If ever there was a shortage of skills at the moment, at the high end, it is pipe welding. And it doesn't matter if that's hydrogen or decarbonisation or looking at the biggest tunnelling project almost in the world. Pipe welders are where it's at, or as most folk call them, the guys that turn up in Ferraris. So if we can do something that saves the world, reduces our carbon emissions and gets us all, perhaps not Ferraris, but Teslas, that would be great. Next slide, please. And there we go. It looks like I've finished. I hope I kept that to 10 minutes, and I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Richard, that's great. Many thanks. You did indeed. I'm sure the report is going to be extremely valuable to a wide range of partners and stakeholders, and I'm looking forward to reading it. Now, I'm pleased to introduce skills colleagues from our projects, and it's going to be great to hear more about them. First, over to Andrew Murdoch and Kate Stinton at CGN, who will tell us more about Bradwell B. So over to you, Andrew and Kate.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this major projects webinar today. So I'm, as said, I'm Andrew Murdoch. I'm Project Development Director for Bradwell B. Together with Kate Stinton, who's our Head of Communications, we're going to give you a brief introduction to the project and our thoughts on workforce and skills development. So if we can move to the next slide. So firstly, I'd like to introduce, please, the EDF and CGN, who together are funding the development of Bradwell B. So they're both, they've been industrial partners for over 30 years, and they're both highly experienced in and world-leading nuclear developers and operators in their own rights. So EDF is the UK's largest producer of low carbon energy, with over 50 nuclear reactors in the UK in operation. And CGN is the world's largest constructor of new nuclear plant, with 7 units currently under construction. And together, EDF and CGN are funding both the ongoing generic design assessment process for the HPL 1000 reactor and the development at Bradwell B. So let's just move a little bit on to the sort of CGN more broadly in the UK. So CGN is currently committed to investing up to 10 billion in the UK's new nuclear industry. And we'll hear later from Kate how much of that goes directly into the UK economy, with the examples given from Hinkley Point C. Obviously, Hinkley Point C is currently under construction in Somerset. Sizewell C is in an advanced state of development, with the project going both through the development consent order examination process as we speak, and also entering into negotiations with the UK government. Bradwell B is, as Kate and I represent, and we'll give you an overview of where the project is there, and General Nuclear Systems, who are progressing the generic design assessment, and they are making excellent progress towards completing the GDA process for the HPL 1000 technology. The key point is there's a great opportunity for learning from experience moving through the projects that we set out here in the UK. So then a little bit about the Bradwell site itself. It's one of 8 sites listed in the National Policy Statement, EN6, for new nuclear, for the potential development of new nuclear. It's on the north of the Dengie Peninsula, adjacent to the now decommissioned Magnox site of the same name. We remain at a very relatively early stage of development. Last year, we carried out a first stage of consultation relating to the development consent order. We're currently progressing some of our key engineering feasibility activities, and we will move to further stages of consultation in the future. You know, at this stage in the project, there's a lot of work for us to do before we can move into construction. We need to secure all of the consents and permissions. We need a nuclear site license from the ONR. We also need to develop the supply chain, procure the contracts required for construction, complete the engineering, etc. A lot of normal development activities. But for me, one of the key aspects of our development is working in partnership, developing the social value proposition, understanding the socioeconomic opportunities and the impacts of the project, and actually from a workforce and skills point of view, demonstrate we've got the right skills to deliver the project, whilst at the same time ensuring that we're providing the best opportunities for local people and businesses to be part of the project and therefore maximize the benefits locally. So let me hand over to Kate at this point.
Thanks, Andrew. Hello, everybody. So yes, as Andrew was saying, we are in relatively early days of the project at the moment. We have been doing some high-level work on our education, employment and skills strategy, however, and you can see the 4 pillars that sit behind that at the moment. Pillars 1 and 3 are very, very similar in reality. It's making sure that we do deliver real economic benefit to the region, and that's being able to do that is all about understanding the national, regional and local priorities. So again, that's a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last year or two, is learning from key stakeholders and partners across the east of England on the skills agenda. Number 2 is absolutely key. It's all about timing. The project will need certain skills. We need to make sure that they are available and that they're available at the right time. And finally, noting that we absolutely do have to learn from our sister projects over at Hinckley and Sizewell as they progress, and it puts Bradwell in a fantastic position, to be honest, in that we can learn from them all. So if we go to the next slide. So in terms of the commitments that Bradwell has made to date, we did a first stage of public consultation last year. There are going to be 900 permanent jobs once the power station goes into operation, and that will be for at least 60 years. There will be tens of thousands of jobs during construction, so slight amend from the presentation earlier. It's only at peak that there will be 9,000 jobs, so it's much bigger in scale, and 3,000 of those jobs at peak would be coming from the local and regional area. There'll also be jobs being delivered during the regular outages the power station would have, and we've also committed to having at least 1,200 apprenticeships during the construction period, delivered together by ourselves, by our supply chain, by partners. So if we go to the next slide, please, Amy, thank you. So yeah, coming back to the point about timing being everything, what you can see on this slide is a phasing, the key phases of the project broadly over a 10-year period, different areas of focus, different skills that are going to be required. And what you are seeing at the bottom is the connection of the current years of school, that where students would actually be able to fit in with these phases. So straightforwardly, those in the those older students are most likely to be involved in those early years of construction, so being involved in earthworks and civil construction. Those youngest pupils at the moment are most likely to be involved in the commissioning and operational side of things. Now, obviously, this is dependent upon the project needing to go through its early development phase. So actually what you might well see is that those pupils currently in years 12 and 13 are actually likely to go through the relevant pipelines for certain skills, go and work on some of the other major projects that we're going to hear from today, and then bring those skills and experience back into Bradwell. And certainly that's something that we've seen on our Hinckley project. I remember seeing it with steel fixers in particular, where they went and worked on the Crossrail project for a bit, and then came back to the Hinckley project. So if we go to the next slide. So I do want to reflect on Hinckley because it is the absolute best example that we have so far of one of these major projects, major nuclear projects being developed in the UK. They released a report yesterday, actually, a socio-economic report, their annual report. So I do encourage people to take a look at it because it's really astonishing information that they're sharing. A couple of some highlights from it to date, and they're only under halfway through the construction so far. They've had nearly 12,000 jobs created, 36% of which are coming from the local area. The new information that they have created is the projected jobs coming from the project, so i.e. not just direct jobs, but indirect as well across the supply chain, 71,000 across the UK, which is obviously pretty massive. They're well on the way to delivering their commitment of apprenticeships, which was 1,000, so 756 so far. And they've already trained many thousands in the Construction Skills and Innovation Centre that they have there. Now, one of the points I really wanted to reflect on quite quickly, I'm conscious of time, is that, again, Richard mentioned welding earlier. It is recognised that welding is a skills shortage across the UK, and there's been multiple discussions that we've had with stakeholders in the east of England about this point as well. Hinckley recognised this as a need, and they opened a construction welding a welding centre of excellence back in 2020. Perhaps I think a lesson from that is that they would have felt that if they had understood this point a bit earlier, that would have been opened a bit earlier, and they've taken that lesson and they're now applying it to considering other centres of excellence in mechanical skills and electrical skills as well. And I think it's something that we should be considering, given all of the major projects that we have. Is there that form of centre of excellence of skills training that we can deliver in the East that can help all of the projects as one? So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And I'm passing back to Andrew.
Thank you, Kate. So what next for us at Bradwell? So as I said, we remain at an early stage of development, and a key focus really is on learning from the other major projects. As I said, particularly our sister projects at Hinckley and Sizewell, but also the other major projects in the region. We are particularly keen to keep working with the key organisations in Essex to develop our understanding of what Essex needs and wants. This meeting is another great example of the opportunities that we have to do that. Whilst we did develop our longer term strategy and initial skills interventions, and they continue to develop, we will continue to look at education outreach and how we can contribute to that, and working with partners, Careers Enterprise Company and Speakers for Schools, etc., as to how we can contribute to that. Ultimately, we're looking to develop Bradwell B in partnership. We recognise the value that comes from that. We want to ensure we maximise the value to communities, to businesses, and to the local economy from the project. So thanks very much for giving us the time today, and back to Chris.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kate and Andrew. And now over to Lara Poole to talk about Ebbsfleet Garden City. So Lara, over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and morning, everybody. I think Amy's going to put my slides up in a second. Thank you. Just as a brief introduction, yes, I'm Lara Poole and I'm the Skills Coordinator at Ebbsfleet Development Corporation, who are the corporation responsible for delivering Ebbsfleet Garden City. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of the location, for those of you who may not know the North Kent area, Ebbsfleet Garden City is located between Dartford and Gravesend, and indeed is across both of the boroughs of Gravesham and Dartford. You can see down there on the left-hand side, that's Blue Water. So if anybody knows the size of Blue Water, you can see that the Ebbsfleet Garden City is vast in comparison. Ebbsfleet International Station is currently at the centre of the site, and we're not just about new build, we're also about regeneration. So you'll see there's two pockets just against the river on the right hand side there in Northfleet, where we are regenerating existing areas and communities as well. And then at the top there is the Swanscombe Peninsula, which of course Ellie is going to talk about in terms of the local resort later on. So next slide, please. So the Garden City. The development is going to run for the next 12, 13, 14 years. It's a long-term and huge-scale city that's being created. It's not just about the 15,000 homes that are going to be built, but about creating communities and making Ebbsfleet a great place to live and to work. So there are primary schools, there's going to be a secondary school, there's one existing secondary school already in the Garden City. We're looking at health and wellbeing hubs, so there'll be clinical provision as well as wellbeing and health within that hub. Major sports facilities, from sports centres to pitches, football pitches, etc. And there'll be community centres dotted around the Garden City, which I'll come on to in a little while, because we're creating what we're calling walkable neighbourhoods where everybody has access to community facilities. Ebbsfleet Central is going to be the town centre, I suppose, and that's where the international station is at the moment. So that's all going to be redeveloped, all those car parks we now own as the Ebbsfleet Development Corporation. So that's going to become a vibrant new commercial centre with homes, offices, retail. And then, as you would expect from a garden city, there's a huge plan for lakes, rivers, parks, greenery. We've got a tree planting scheme which will happen later this year that involves a community. We've also got a huge focus on arts and culture and how the use of arts and culture can bring communities together. And that's using a regeneration of existing buildings, as well as the development of new building for cultural use. We are an NHS Healthy New Town as well, and that involves an app which residents can use to work out how healthy they're being, how many steps a day they're doing. There's also an Edible Ebbsfleet initiative where the communities are able to plant their own food and across the Garden City as well. And there is obviously a focus on sustainability and environmental as well, in terms of everything that's being built on the Garden City, from the homes right the way through to transportation, to the community centres, to the schools, etc. So next slide, please. Okay, so up to now, the Ebbsfleet Development Corporation have been very focused on infrastructure, roads, utilities, water, electricity. We've built a bridge that takes people from the community, the existing community and the new community at Springhead across to the what it will be Ebbsfleet Central, and that cuts about 7 minutes off the journey. And we've also been focusing on integrating the existing communities in the local area, businesses, residents, with the new communities that are moving into the area as well. I've mentioned about regeneration of existing space as well as the new build. And in terms of transportation, for those of you who don't know, the Ebbsfleet International Station is on HS1, so you're 17 minutes away from central London, St Pancras, and just 2 hours from Paris. We're in very close proximity to Bluewater, and indeed there will be a tunnel that goes through between the two quarries that links the Garden City to Bluewater. That's under construction at the moment. We're close to the A2, the M25, the new Lower Thames crossing, which Amy will talk about in a while. There'll be new fast track bus routes through the Garden City, utilising that tunnel through to Bluewater as well. We have cycle routes, and potentially there could be the Thames Clipper from the peninsula in the future also. And in terms of the Thames, we're also within the Thames Estuary Growth Area. And you will have seen from the previous map that I showed as well that the Swanscombe Peninsula is just above us, and that potentially will be the London resort. So I've just got a little bit of some drone footage to show you that gives you a flavour of the types of housing and development that is taking place. Okay. There's no sound to this, so I'm afraid you're going to have to listen to my voice as I talk through the video. It's just to give you a flavour of the types of neighbourhoods that we're building. Each of the pockets of land are being developed by different development companies. So each of them has a different outlook. The style of the housing is slightly different. And as I say, we do want to create small neighbourhoods rather than one, huge housing estate. So, for example, there's a park in this neighbourhood. There's a couple of tennis courts that you can see there as well. And although there is a lot of greenery, once we get planting and get some trees in there, then there'll be substantial amount of greenery across the Garden City also. We've got a mixed tenure on different styles of housing. So there's some affordable housing. There's going to be intergenerational housing also. We're currently in the process of building some accessible homes as well. And there's also some self-build type of homes that are planned for the very near future as well. That's one of the lakes that you can see there, and you see the Dartford Bridge in the background, so you can see the location. And this is some of the earthworks that we've been doing over the last few years to make sure that the quarry and the infrastructure are ready to take the housing. And you can see there how we are making sure that each of the neighbourhoods are slightly different from each other. And this is the Springhead Bridge that I referenced earlier, that takes people from Springhead up to the international station there in the background. Okay, the bridge is now finished. That was when it was under construction. And there's an example of a different neighbourhood within the Garden City as well. And again, you can see parks and facilities for children there as well. Okay, I think there we go. Right. So that's where we're at the moment. By 2035, the Garden City. Oops. I think the slides have gone wrong there. Sorry, I'll just carry on regardless. By 2035, if we can eventually see the slides again, you'll see that it's not just about homes on the Garden City. We're looking at providing facilities for each of those walkable neighbourhoods, everything from schools to youth centres, community centres, libraries, all being co-designed with the community and local partners as well. And the idea is to add value to life in the Garden City. So each of these walkable neighbourhoods are shown as 400 metres and 800 metres, and you can see that those mixed use community centres and facilities are spread across the Garden City so that there is equitable access to each of them. Thank you, Amy. If we could go to the next slide. Lovely. So I'm part of the placemaking team at the Ebbsfleet Development Corporation, and we are looking at how we can make the Garden City a great place to live. So it's not just, I keep saying it's not just about homes, it is about creating communities and cohesive communities. So that's one of our themes. The environment obviously is another, and that includes everything from the way that the sustainable housing is built right the way through to the parklands and Edible Ebbsfleet, for example. And then economy, and this is where my role really fits. Obviously, in terms of economy, employment and skills are really the driving force there. And we've taken an inclusive growth approach to the economy, in that we want to make sure that the economic benefits of the Garden City will benefit the future residents, existing residents, and really stay within the local community. So next slide, please, Amy. Okay, so the vision, as I said, around skills, employment and education is to make sure that local residents benefit from the growth and economic investment in the area. And that means that the local needs, ambitions and aspirations need to be taken into account. So we're working very collaboratively with the local communities at the moment to make sure that their needs are met and that there is a link between the demand and supply that Richard was talking about around skills as well. We're working collaboratively so that we can maximise the opportunities as well. That's part of the vision. So we're working with all of the other major projects who are here today, plus local authorities and key education providers in the local area, charities, the third sector, the JCP, etc. Okay, so next slide, please, Amy. The approach at the moment is to focus on construction. Eventually, obviously, there will be the need to look at operational areas as well, and also all of the other skills and employment that will become available within the Garden City. The approach, therefore, is to look at how we coordinate all of that, develop a framework and the collaborations, make the opportunities that are available accessible to local residents, and ensure that they have the skills to be able to either retrain or gain a career for young people, for example. We're pushing the equality and diversity agenda by working with those who are furthest away from employment, and also you know, there'll be a big communications plan and some resource that's required in order to deliver this approach. Next slide, please. So the first part of the strategy really is to understand the demand, understand what the skills gaps are both now and what they will be in the future. So there's a survey in progress which I've been working with Richard on. He's doing the wider South East LEP survey. I've done a very specific survey for developers and contractors in the Garden City to find out what their skills gaps are now and what they might need in the future. And again, working collaboratively with the other major projects in North Kent specifically, because, you know, the background to all of this is that there are going to be lots of construction skills required. So we want to develop a pipeline for the future, raising awareness and aspirations within education, etc. These are the themes that we've had so far that have come back from the survey with employers. So they are looking for support. They need that pipeline for the future. There's some gap around promoting STEM subjects at school, which they would like us to support them with. And then they'd like us to be an education liaison for both the immediate career opportunities that they have, and ensure that there is a coordinated approach for engagement with schools and education in the future as well. So next slide, please. So my 2-year plan, therefore, is to set up a job brokerage service immediately, because at the moment there isn't a one-stop shop, as it were, for the Garden City. So we're creating that. So anybody who wants to find work in the Garden City, it's quite difficult to do that at the moment. So we need to make that far more accessible and easy. I'm looking to set up an apprenticeship scheme as well in September, so that anybody who is part of or working with a contractor or with one of the developers on their apprenticeship scheme can also have some additional support from the Garden City as well. Then the Education Awareness and Aspirational Careers Programme will be a joint collaborative programme with the other 2 major projects in North Kent. There's going to be a massive need for interwork and work readiness training programmes for local residents who might want to upskill, reskill, or just change career to get into construction. And then longer term, I'm looking at a construction skills academy, similar to what Hinckley had delivered as well, that Kate was talking about earlier. So next slide, please. Okay, so the job brokerage service, just very quickly, how it would work would be that it would link to the application process with the contractors and the developers on site. But it would also signpost people to any relevant training they may need to do. It will link in and out of the LEP website that Louise has set up, and also working to see how we can prioritise local applicants using that job brokerage service also. Next slide, please. So the apprenticeship scheme is one I'm quite excited about, and the objective really is to make apprentices, where they're working with so many different organisations and companies in the Garden City, is to make them feel part of the Garden City, raise their aspirations, their understanding of what the Garden City is all about, the social values that we're hoping to deliver, and how they can be part of that as well. So next slide, please, Amy. So what we're proposing to do is have a 3-day induction program for the apprentices, and give them a mentor and make them feel part of the Garden City. There'll be a tour of the Garden City, some programs around what a Garden City is, and the aspirations that we have around local people and making communities, etc. Then they would spend time on a selection of programs that we're delivering as well as part of our inclusive growth strategy. So they might spend time on the education outreach program, or helping people get back into the workplace by giving them taster sessions on site. They might become a STEM ambassador or a young apprentice ambassador network representative as well. And then the benefits of that are all listed there really. So that we want to make them feel part of the Garden City. We would like them to be part of the Kent Apprentice graduation ceremony at Rochester Cathedral. We're looking at a discount scheme for them, etc. So that's my main focus right now, is to try and get the apprenticeship scheme up and running. Next slide, please. Education outreach. This is about short term, creating aspirations to progress into careers in the built environment for the construction roles that are available now, and getting young people through work experience, internships and into apprenticeships. And then longer term, it'd be based on the skills gap analysis to make sure that that is filled by young people studying the right curriculum, and working with schools to see if there are any curriculum elements that we can develop that will give people the skills to be able to progress into careers in the built environment. Next slide, please. Then the interwork or work readiness programs. I mean, unfortunately, there's massive unemployment, as Louise mentioned earlier. In Gravesham itself, unemployment is at 7.6%, which, you know, compared to the southeast, that's 5.4%. And young people up to the age of 24 have been affected the most as well. In Gravesend, you're looking at 13.2% unemployment in that age group. So it's how do we help those young people get into work, give them the skills. We're looking at short-term programs to get them site ready as well as work ready, upskilling, reskilling, working with the DWP, SWAP, Kickstart programs, etc. So are there ways that we can assist with taster sessions, getting them on site, assist them with their PPE, travel, all of those kind of things as well. So that's a work ready program that I'm hoping to launch pretty soon. Next slide, please. And then finally, longer term project would be to look at an actual physical construction skills academy, so that, you know, any particular skills that are missing that can't be provided by the local education establishments, perhaps we can do on the Garden City. So again, referring back to Kate's comments about welders and mechanical and electrical, if there are specific gaps like that, can we deliver those through a skills academy on site? And I think that brings me to the end. Next slide. Yes, there we go. So that's me. That's where we're at the moment, and that's our aspirations for the future.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now turn to Robert Edge, who will give some headlines about Freeport East. So Robert, over to you.
Apologies for that. Hi, Robert Edge from the Haven Gateway Partnership. Those of you who don't know us, we're currently supplying some of the Secretariat functions to Freeport East as it progresses through the regulation and permission environment to start offering incentives for people to locate in R3 tax sites. Can you change slide, please, Amy? Thank you. Well, Christian was mentioning earlier about collaboration, and this, I think, indicates the fact that we've got a collaboration of 2 LEPs, 2 county councils and 3 districts across those 2 counties to try and bring Freeport East together. Next slide, please, Amy. Yeah, that shows really probably a little bit superfluous for the purposes of this discussion, but actually shows where the two ports of Felixstowe and Harwich are, and certainly a global gateway. Okay, next slide, please, Amy. Okay, so Harwich International, it's had a it's had a train ferry service to Rotterdam since about 1860, only interrupted by 2 world wars, but it's still the main East Coast trailer port for Northern Europe. It's congestion-free, ro-ro service into Hook of Holland and Europort. And in fact, from the Hook of Holland via the Dutch motorway system, you can be in the Ruhr, in the heart of Germany, in about 3 hours in a truck, which again still offers some valuable supply chain advantages. Harwich has also been used in the past for building offshore wind farms, for assembly of construction material for the farms, and also has a couple of years ago Galloper Wind Farm opened its operation and maintenance base in Harwich, which employs some very highly skilled people with a mixture of electrical and mechanical engineering skills, as well as the skills necessary to survive in the middle of the North Sea, up the top of a wind farm, about 100 metres up, 30 miles away from land. So there's some particular skills needed there. They're taking on about 3 to 4 apprentices a year. And the last apprentice cohort had 4 local young people, of which 3 were female. So it's you know, good to see that sort of activity taking place in the port, and we want to see more of that. Next slide, please. Okay, well, as I say, it's a national hub for global trade, is the port of Felixstowe. 40% of all containers coming in and out of the UK use Felixstowe. 30% of all containers use rail to get in and out of Felixstowe to ports in the to railheads in the north and the Midlands and Scotland. More currently, although still handling twice as many TEUs, which is a 20-foot container, so you've still got twice as many as any other UK port, and well connected with Asia. We've got regular freight ferry services to Europe, again to Rotterdam. The main difference between the Felixstowe service and the Harwich service is the Harwich service tends to have trucks with drivers driving off the ferry to other destinations, whereas in Felixstowe, the trailers are just left there and towed off the ferry and onwards to their new destinations. Next slide, please. Okay, part of Hutchison Port, the world's largest port operator, and part of the CK Hutchison Group, which is a very large conglomerate in Hong Kong. And as you'll see later on in the presentation, there are particular significant synergies with the other group companies that they have in the UK, such as the Mobile Network 3, Eversalt Rail Leasing, and Northern Gas Networks. Next slide, please. So the government intention is for a world-leading free port model with these objectives: establish free ports as national hubs for global trade and investment. Well, certainly we already, I think, tick the box for the global trade. We need to work a little bit harder on the investment, because obviously a lot of the components, raw materials, etc., are actually going through the free port in trucks and containers en route to other parts of the UK. We want to try and capture them and promote the regeneration and job creation on our patch. And the third objective, which is particularly we're charged to deliver, is to create hotbeds for innovation. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so again, you know, when you look at Felixstowe and Harwich, they may be in different counties, but they are approximately half a nautical mile away from each other by sea. So you look at the statistics itself with the terms of the connections, springboard into Europe. But what I'm particularly interested about is the access to the UK's clean energy cluster. Further to the north, you've got the ports of Lowestoft and Great Yarmouth, who are very busy with the construction and the operations and maintenance of wind farms. Approximately 50% of the UK's current wind production, offshore wind production, is handled in the southern North Sea. Even though the government is calling in the Energy White Paper a quadrupling of this capacity, we estimate the eastern region will still be about 50% of the UK's offshore wind generation by 2030, with the wind farms that are at various stages of planning and commissioning and developing. As I mentioned, not just that, we are also equidistant between the sites of Bradwell and Sizewell. And I know for a fact that Hutchison Ports are in dialogue with both nuclear developers in terms of how the ports could potentially support those projects with the logistics requirements of materials and other activities. And Hutchison Ports is the UK's largest single inward investor. Not quite as glamorous as people like Google and Facebook and Amazon, but in terms of the capital invested in their networks, they are the largest and much more diversified, which is why you don't hear so much about them in the media. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're already working with world-leading universities. We've got very strong links with the University of Essex, but as the objective for Freeport is working with other areas of expertise, we've got very good links with Cranfield, with Birmingham, who have particular expertise in the hydrogen economy. And where we see hydrogen going further is in the development of green hydrogen, using renewable energy to power electrolyzers to produce that. We've got links with the Cambridge High-Tech Cluster, particularly new developers like Cambridge 5G, Cambridge Wireless, and following discussions we've been having recently, Cambridge Cleantech, as well as the BT Adastral Park facility. Down below, you've also got the fact that Felixstowe is the leading community systems provider, a company called Maritime Cargo Processing PLC, which actually spun out of a project from Felixstowe's IT department about 30 years ago. But a number of other free ports in the country are actually using this technology to manage the security and the systems within the port. I've mentioned about the clean energy cluster. Renewable energy hub potential. We've already had inquiries we're dealing with heat pump manufacturers who are looking to manufacture in the UK. Given that the Energy White Paper mentioned a 20-fold increase in heat pump installations between now and 2028, that it means that a number of companies who are not currently manufacturing in the UK are now considering and revising those plans. We've also had discussions from a producer in the Middle East looking at producing hydrogen from using solar power as the energy in the desert to desalinate seawater and then produce hydrogen to tank it here. And we have renewable industry for support from organisations like Hydrogen East and the East of England Energy Group. Next slide, please. So this is really about regeneration and job creation. We've got within the Freeport East area, the UK's #1 most deprived neighbourhood. 18% of the areas in tendering and 14% of Ipswich are in the 10 most deprived areas in England. We've got average wage levels lower than in Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds within the Freeport East area. So obviously job creation, skills provision is very much what we're about. We're going to have about 300 acres of development sites where the tax incentives for free ports are available. Both one in Felixstowe, one at Gateway 14 in Stowmarket, but the largest single site is actually going to be in Harwich. So 200 acres at Harwich Barside Bay is really what we're going to be pushing in the medium term. It needs a bit of development work still, so the first 50 acres aren't going to be available until probably early to mid 2023. But what we really want to see is the bringing in benefits locally, as well as acting as a supply chain to the Midlands and the northern manufacturers. Next slide, please. So these are the guiding principles that we believe that the free ports can deal with, you know, both with international trade and investment, as well as green energy. Skills, access to new jobs and upskilling the existing workforce. We certainly see that with the new opportunities with hydrogen. More value-added employment, working with further and higher education providers. We obviously would prefer to, certainly with the further education providers, we've got very good links with the local FE colleges and the University of Essex, but there are occasions where higher education expertise can't be provided within our patch, you know, for example, in hydrogen engineering. And so we will work with, you know, wherever we can get the right level of expertise. Coastal catalyst, again, we see that particularly in tendering and in JWIC, average incomes are low, and we need to inspire people to look and enable them to take advantage of the jobs that are going to be available. And we are the only port in the global top 50. So again, we're going to be dredging the channel to make it so we can get even larger ships in later this year. And again, part of the world's leading port network, so we can make further introductions. Okay, that just about covers me. Thanks a lot for your time.
Robert, thank you very much. That was great. We do, of course, also have Thames Freeport coming into this area alongside Freeport East. And at the next of these sessions, there will be more about that. Now, over to Ellie Evans, who will tell us about London Resorts. So Ellie, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully you will then be able to see some slides. I'm hoping they're now up on your screen. So I'll just give you a bit of an overview to start with on London Resorts and what it is. And obviously the focus today is on employment and skills, but to start with, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what the proposals are. So London Resort Company Holdings are proposing to deliver a world-class entertainment resort on the banks of the River Thames. I've got a little map later, but as Lara mentioned earlier, we're on the Swanscombe Peninsula, falling within the Ebbsfleet Garden City wider area. The vision for London Resort is to generate a completely unique, immersive, world-class destination. So unlike any theme parks we've currently got in the UK, and to do so in a sustainable and environmentally responsible way. We've got a variety of partners. Some of you may have seen in the news recently the dinosaurs themed base camp, which will be one of the lands within the theme park. There will be more IP partners and there will be different themes across the whole resort, making it a really exciting and varied opportunity, hopefully attracting a really wide range of attendees, from young families with children right through the age range. The aim is to harness the natural landscape, the area in which we fall, and the riverside location. Everything about it will be innovative and flexible. What global theme parks show us is that they constantly evolve, and we need to therefore be constantly generating new material to attract new attendees. The benefit of all of this, and obviously the purpose of today, is that this will be a catalyst for job creation and regeneration of the area. Just to give you an idea of where we're up to, Chris mentioned at the start that all of the projects we're talking about today are at various stages of the sort of planning process. So I thought I'd give you a little timescale of The proposals for London Resort have been around for a number of years. You can see from we did a number of public engagement sessions back in 2014, 2015. The project stalled then for a while, and then in 2019 it really got momentum again with the appointment of PY Jabot as CEO. PY has experience from the Dome and from Disneyland Paris and a number of other leisure attractions, bringing a real driver back to the project. Since then, we've been undergoing lots of detailed work, and we had a statutory consultation in the summer of last year. And right on the last day of last year, 31st of December 2020, the DCO application was submitted. And the planning inspectorate then has 28 days to accept it. So they accepted it, which means we're now in a detailed examination period. A part of the land was recently designated SSSI, which means there's been a slight delay to that timeframe. But at the moment, we are going through the detailed design and updating of various material to enable the Secretary of State to arrive at a decision in next year, 2022, after which, if it's successful, construction would begin and Gate 1 would open in 2024. Just in terms of giving you a feel for what a global entertainment resort contains, there will be 2 phases, so 2 gates to the theme park. Gate 1 opening in 2024, Gate 2 2029. Those are the anticipated estimated timescales. As part of that, as well as all of the entertainment and rides and attractions, there will also be hotel rooms with a number of different levels and potentially themed. There will also be lots of retail, dining and other leisure opportunities across the resort, including esports, a conference centre and my personal favourite, a water park. The aim of all of those elements is that everything about it will be themed to be resort specific. So none of the retail or the dining or entertainment that you get here would be a direct competitor or comparison to anything else that we have in the local area. The intention is to be entirely unique, therefore attracting new visitors and not competing on a like-for-like basis with anything that currently exists in the area. Also, as part of the scheme, there will be some operational housing on site. So it's estimated there'll be 500 units accommodating up to 2,000 members of staff on site. There will be a variety of transport interchanges with a big focus on trying to minimise car travel and maximise public transport and active travel using Ebbsfleet International and the link to that, which Lara already mentioned. There's also a link to Tilbury and the intention to have park and glide, so park at Tilbury and to be able to come across the river. And I know a lot of questions always come about the transport that will support this, and I'm not personally an expert on those, so I can't answer those, but there are very detailed transport plans to try and make this as sustainable as possible in transport terms. All of that comes together to, the vision is to deliver a global theme park that will bring us into the top 20 theme parks globally. That would make us about 5 times the size of any theme park currently existing in the UK. And by maturity, we're hoping to attract an attendance of over 12 million visitors. Just a quick picture of where it is. As you'll notice earlier, this overlaps with the map Lara showed earlier. So we're on the Swanscombe Peninsula with part of our red line boundary across in Thurrock, where there would be that link in terms of the park and glide that I mentioned earlier. So bringing me on to the topic we're talking about today, employment and skills. What we've been doing in developing our employment and skills strategy is starting by doing a detailed critique and review of the local area and identifying problems and issues currently within with respect to employment and skills. I'm not going to go into these in lots of detail because they overlap with things lots of other people have said. But broadly speaking, we've identified that there is relatively high unemployment in parts of the area. Lara's mentioned the higher rates in some parts of Gravesham, for example, and particularly we see much higher rates in some priority sectors and underrepresented groups. So I've noted a few there: women, ethnic minorities and young people. All of whom I think, again, Lara mentioned. And what we see is that unemployment rates in some of those groups are 50 or 100% higher than average unemployment rates. So what we're aiming to try and do then is to see how we can identify and then offer opportunities that really appeal to those priority groups. Other factors are pockets of deprivation, particularly around the Swanscombe Peninsula and in Tilbury. They're some of the more deprived parts of this local area. What we see as the main driver of deprivation is around employment, skills and training, and over half of the small areas within Dartford, Gravesham and Thurrock fall within the worst 30% on that deprivation measure of employment, skills and training, and there are parts of those areas that are even more deprived than that. So that's one of the things we really want to try and address with our employment and skills strategy. Again, across the area, relatively low qualifications, so particularly at the higher rates of qualifications, there are much lower proportions of the population with higher rates of qualifications when compared on a regional level. Linked to that, lower rates of productivity, so there has actually been quite good progress in increasing the earnings of those in the lower earning categories, but the median earnings is still below the average. What we've also identified from detailed conversations with all of the education institutions across the area is a lack of vocational opportunities. So again, that's something we hope we can really deliver upon. So what we've done in devising our employment and skills strategy is essentially try to map what those key issues are across the area, which I've already talked about. We've then looked at the policy objectives from the local authorities and the regional bodies that link into those. And we've then set ourselves as London Resort 4 key objectives, which then underpin everything that we're going to propose going forward. So the first one of those is creating local opportunities. So that's trying to minimise the number of people leaving the core study area, get more unemployed local people into work, and offer a really wide range of opportunities across the sorts of sectors that the local area is trying to target growth in. And many of the high growth sectors that the local area is targeting match really well with what London Resort will deliver. So construction, hospitality, leisure and tourism are all obvious areas where we will be delivering significant job opportunities. Also, in terms of the increasing vocational opportunities, we need to work collaboratively with all of the local education institutions, and we want to create career paths, not just jobs, to try and increase that productivity and retain people within the workforce. And finally, we need to do all of that in a diverse and inclusive way such that we can improve opportunities for all local residents. So this is just summarising those 4 objectives, which I won't repeat. So on to some of the numbers. The construction phase will support an estimated 23,000 job years. What we've been trying to do is understand how that will be split across the 2 phases I mentioned. And as Richard mentioned earlier, some of that will be off-site and using modular forms of construction. So we're estimating a split of that in terms of timescales, but also using modular construction wherever we can and modern methods of construction to build things or manufacture things off-site and then construct them on-site. In terms of direct operational jobs, once we're operating and attracting tourists to the area, the intention is that we will be one of the largest single-site employers in the whole of the UK. Starting at 2024, we'll have over 8,000 jobs on site and more than doubling to over 17,000 at maturity in 2038. The vast majority of those will be at the theme park itself, but there will also be significant jobs across the range of hotels that I've mentioned. And many of these jobs will have relatively low entry-level requirements. So there's a really wide range of opportunities, from over 200 lifeguards in the water park through to ride attendants and engineers, entertainers, musicians, dancers, actors. There'll also then be cleaners, there'll be obviously management roles, legal, accounting, IT, a really, really wide range of opportunities to hopefully therefore appeal to a really wide range of people and their skills. One of the things we want to ensure is that there is significant progression, and the scale of this opportunity means that there will be progression within every area. So whilst there are entry-level positions within, say, food and beverage, there are also then managerial and always improvements to progress your career with London Resort. One of our key aims is to try and improve retention, and that's because when we've looked at issues in the hospitality sector, one of the main issues it has is a massive rate of turnover of staff. So one of our KPIs that we will set ourselves will be to improve retention. So in terms of how we're implementing and what specific programmes we're planning on coming up with, we've set up an employment and skills task force that has representatives from all of the host local authorities, the EDC, South East LEP, a wide variety of training providers, education provision from further education through to universities. What we've been doing is having a series of topic-based sessions with that group and individual meetings to therefore come up with a series of KPIs. These will include targets around apprenticeships, supply chain, school engagement, retention I've mentioned, career progression, local rates of employment, priority groups. I've put a few examples here of the sorts of things we're intending to commit to. So during the construction phase, planning to commit to the fact that 5% of all construction opportunities will be earn and learn roles. That's a KPI that has been delivered on a number of major infrastructure projects and is a good example of best practice. Those earn and learn positions can be apprenticeships, but they can also be traineeships, newly qualified graduates, upskilling opportunities. The intention there is to allow ourselves and the local authority flexibility over exactly what's delivered there. What we found through our engagement is that it's not all about apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are great and they're a really amazing form of training and getting people into work, but they're not right for everybody. So we want to make sure we have a really wide range. We will also set ourselves an apprenticeship target of 15 apprenticeship starts per 1,000 workers once operational. Another element of apprenticeships is that we want to set ourselves a KPI to improve the completion rate on apprenticeships, not just set ourselves start rates, because what we see is that across some areas and in some industries, completion rates for apprenticeships can be lower than 50%. So we want to try and increase those so that people are not just starting, they're also completing that apprenticeship. And that will be done through the sorts of interventions Lara mentioned in terms of making sure we're offering mentoring and a wider programme of pastoral care around those apprenticeships so that people are incentivised and able to complete those opportunities. There'll also be a wide range of other work experience placements, employee encounters and workplace experience opportunities. The Careers and Enterprise Company have a series of metrics that we're proposing to use here. So 1 employee encounter per 7 employees, 1 workplace opportunity per 25 employees. Those have all been developed to try and look at what is necessary to bridge the gap between our secondary school students and getting them the sorts of opportunities they need so that they're work ready and they have opportunity to access the workforce and know what opportunities are there and what jobs they want to go into. We also then want to set ourselves a target of becoming an employer of choice for under 25s and have our strategy endorsed by a number of industry bodies. That's to make sure we can hold ourselves to account as delivering on the sorts of objectives that we're talking about here today. One example of what we've been looking into is identifying and responding to skills gaps. Within hospitality, a couple of the key issues here are a poor perception of the industry, which leads to people coming and leaving and not progressing in the industry, as I talked about earlier, and high staff turnover. And there are a number of very specific skills shortages within hospitality. Chef shortages have been mentioned many times, front of house managerial staff. So the intention is to develop targeted programs that will address some of those skills gaps. What we're doing at the moment is developing our employment and skills strategy, and an update on that will be published in the coming months. That will include commitments to a number of the KPIs I've mentioned, and also commitments to producing monitoring reports and a number of accompanying strategies that will go into detail about how we'll deliver on some of the things I've talked about. Lara mentioned a school engagement plan. We're aiming for that to be collaborative with Lower Thames Crossing and Ebbsfleet Garden City, so that we're not all approaching the same schools and offering different things, but we're doing it in a collaborative way. Identifying and prioritising vulnerable groups to ensure we can identify pathways for them. A supply chain engagement strategy to ensure that the supply chain is aware of the opportunities and able to access them. And continued commitment to identifying skill shortages and appropriate measures to address them. And then, as I mentioned, a retention plan so that we can try and reduce turnover in the hospitality sector. So that's all I'm going to say. I've put a couple of links on the presentation here for you to find out more. Our application, loads of documents that I'm sure you don't want to go into the detail of, are on the Planning Inspectorate's website, which is the first link there. There's a London Resort website, and I would encourage any suppliers or businesses that are on here to sign up for updates so that we can get in touch with you about future opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you so much. we'll now hand over to Amy Cable and Jay Francis to tell us a little bit about the Lower Thames crossing. So over to you, Amy and Jay.
Thank you. So just wanted to say good morning all, and just want to start off by thanking Louise and the CELEP team for arranging this webinar today and creating the Major Projects Working Group. We've already had some really fantastic conversations and very early on around upskilling and developing the skills across the region and maximising opportunities locally. So just wanted to take the time just to thank everybody for today. So just a bit of an introduction. So my name is Amy Cable and I'm the Skills Education Employment Lead for the Lower Thames Crossing Programme. I've worked in construction now for over 8 years, supporting skills within the rail and highway sector. My role in the programme is to lead on the skills, education, employment vision ambition and support the delivery throughout construction. I'll be providing an overview on our vision and ambition, and my colleague Jay will be joining the presentation to talk around SMEs and business engagement. Next 2 slides, please, if that's okay, Amy. And then the next one after that. For those who don't know, the Lower Thames Crossing is a proposed new connection between Kent and Essex. This will include the longest road tunnel in the UK, stretching 2.6 miles and 14.3 miles of new road and around 50 new bridges and viaducts. The Dartford Crossing is one of the country's most strategically important roads. The original design was to support 130,000 vehicles a day, but it's regularly used by over 185,000. That's where the Lower Thames Crossing comes in. Next slide, please. The Lower Thames Crossing provide a vital link for regional and national connectivity. By nearly doubling capacity in the southeast, it will significantly reduce congestion at the Dartford Crossing and improve resilience at existing Thames Crossing. The image provided on the screen showcases the route and the size of the tunnel compared to the existing Dartford Crossing. Next slide, please. We've been working on the project since 2016, for which we've been doing a lot of work to understand what was the best route, the local areas, impacts and ground investigations. We're still in the planning application phase for the project and looking to resubmit towards the end of this year. If the estimated timescale above goes ahead, we're looking for main construction roles to start towards the end of 2022. Next slide, please. Skills education employment is a key priority and focus area for the Lower Thames Crossing programme. We're creating a skills strategy that has been developed in partnership with local stakeholders, so we can build this project and support long-term local needs. We're expected to support over 22,000 people over the life cycle of the scheme, helping in our national economic recovery post-COVID-19, for which we intend to provide sustainable benefits to our local communities by working with our supply chain to break down recruitment barriers whilst nurturing the next generation of talent through jobs, training and education. We recently held our first recruitment outreach for apprentices and graduates to join the project, for which we had a really positive take-up with 83 local applicants. Next slide, please. To support our approach to developing our skills, education and employment strategy, we ran multiple legacy workshops to understand what the local wants, needs and priorities were. The feedback from these sessions were used to influence our objectives, approach and delivery plan. The key themes from these workshops can be shown in the above 4 areas. So you've got jobs and training, so there was workless job starts, so supporting those unemployed into jobs, pre-employment work placement programs for those furthest away from the employment market, retraining for those looking to change disciplines using transferable skills. Then we move on to kind of lasting skills legacy, so qualification once on the programme, making sure we have succession plans in place to continuously grow and improve skills and knowledge, and apprenticeships, graduates and early career talent. We then move on to inspiring the future careers, school engagement, making sure we engage with the next generation, supporting education professionals, teachers, making sure that we also bring them onto the project and we give them information on any innovative ideas we do so they can naturally feed that down to the next generation. And also education placements, including supporting the new T-levels. We also have business growth, so that's creating supply chain support programs, the recent development of our SME directory, which Jay will go into further detail later, and making sure that we really support SME spend and local businesses in the area. Next slide, please. So with over 10,000 jobs estimated through the peak of year of construction, Lower Thames Crossing has been working closely with CITP, DWP, CELEP and local skills working groups and other large infrastructure projects to assess the skills that will be required to deliver the scheme. The table shows the criticality and market scarcity of the likely skills gaps required for the project. To support minimising these gaps and maximising opportunities locally, LTC will be working closely with the Major Projects Working Group, and in addition have developed a Lower Thames Crossing Skills Working Group, who will be a key consultee as the Lower Thames Crossing employment and skills plans are matured and updated on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So how are we going to go about delivering all this work? So we recognise that nobody knows the local area more than the people living it. That's why everything that we're doing, we're working closely with our local communities to understand the local needs throughout the programme. We'll be working with the Lower Thames Crossing Skills Working Group to make sure all annual employment skills plans align with the Skills Education Employment Strategy and support local needs. We also recognise that strategies need to be updated in order to reflect local needs and national needs for skills. So that also will be something we'll be doing. At present, we are currently working in partnerships with our local stakeholders and communities to develop processes and metrics which will maximise opportunities for main construction. So this includes early visibility of job roles for the local communities, a school engagement plan which outlines our approach for better inspiring the next generation and challenging the face of construction. This piece of work has recently expanded through conversations with the Major Projects Working Group and now working with Ellie and Lara to expand those opportunities to make sure we have continuous engagement for local schools. We have our SME directory to support local businesses onto the project. Again, Jay will go into further detail with that in the slides. Identifying and minimising local and national skills gaps. So this includes upskilling prior to the start of construction and continuing to provide regular updates on the skills, education, employment agenda so local communities can be involved with what's going on in their area, and then annual feedback and reviews. So we are also actively delivering the skills, education, employment strategy. So everything we put in there, we are actively as a planning stage delivering against that prior to construction to make sure that the processes we put in place are streamlined and to make sure we set a high standard for the contractors coming on board. Next slide, please. I'm now going to hand you over to Jay Francis, who is leading on the work with SMEs and local businesses, and he'll also talk through some upcoming opportunities that people can get involved in and long term. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And yeah, just wanted to also thank everyone for coming along today and for inviting us along to speak. Yeah, that's a quick slide about me. You can move on to the next one. Which is, yeah, so this is a quick slide to talk to the sort of engagement we've had with local businesses. We've been surveying businesses through our friends and colleagues at the Federation of Small Business and Essex Chambers and Kent Chambers of Commerce. And engaging with businesses throughout the region through bodies like CELEP as well. So this is some of the views we've been hearing from businesses in the area. So these are, I suppose, talking to the sort of direct connectivity benefits that businesses believe they will receive from the Lower Thames Crossing. Then if we go on to the next slide. And this is talking to the more economic side of things. And so the direct economic benefits we want to leave for the area. We want to make sure as much of the project spend stays as local as possible. And therefore we're engaging with SMEs and local businesses to make sure they are in the best possible position to win work on the project. So as part of that, we're working with the Supply Chain Sustainability School, which is a body that delivers free training for businesses so they can learn the skills we want to see on site. And so there are hundreds of CPD accredited courses and modules available through there. We're also delivering a monthly workshop for the coming year through them on topics key to the delivery of the project. We're working with small businesses again to understand what they would want to see and what support they want in order to help them win work on major projects like LTC. And we want to make sure as well that these opportunities are understood to be available not just to businesses directly in construction, but across the whole range. So if we get permission to build the scheme, we're going to need businesses, running the full gamut from cleaning and clerical and civil engineering and a whole host of things that don't begin with the letter C. So we're putting on webinars, workshops to build these skills, and then as well, we're doing a lot of engagement to understand what the barriers might be to bringing on local businesses into the project and getting them into the supply chain. And one of the ways we are removing obstacles to this is with the SME directory, which I believe we talk to a little more on the next slide. So the directory is really, it pretty much says exactly what it is in the name. It's a list of local businesses, SMEs in particular, with their contact details and a little bit about them, separated into categories that we then provide to the bidders for the major contracts, so they can use that to draw on, and to, when they're looking to build their supply chains, they have that ready access to a whole host of local businesses who are ready, raring, and willing to form the supply chain for the project. As you can see there, we've got over 400 signed up already. We're wanting to continue to grow that. So if you are a local business, an SME, the registration link is there on the left-hand side of that slide. We would love to see as many local businesses as possible taking that opportunity to get themselves in front of the major contractors who are bidding for the major contracts on the project. So we will also be using that when we engage with the major contractors to understand what their proposed work schedules look like. And so as we plot out the sort of work that will be taking place across the construction period, we can then look at the SME directory and see where there are gaps there, and we can target recruitment to those particular fields locally, and again make sure we're drawing on as much local resource as we can for the project, and as I say, putting as much of the project spend back into the local communities. I mentioned before monthly workshops with the Supply Chain Sustainability School. That is available for anyone to sign up to, absolutely free to use for businesses. So supplychainschool.co.uk is the link to go to for hundreds of resources and those monthly workshops we run, as well as all of the workshops that are running with their other partners. And we put out a supply chain newsletter with updates about the project and timeframes and anything new on the horizon, particularly from a procurement point of view, or just from the sort of business engagement point of view. And yeah, you can sign up by just emailing me there. On to the next slide, please. And from the skills, employment, education point of view, these are the things that are available currently. So yeah, Amy mentioned the sort of work we're doing with our friends and colleagues in the room here now. but we've got a whole host of resources available besides, so do have a look at that. I think that is my final slide, is it? Oh, there we go. A little bit more information about the project through those links, the website, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And yeah, that is us. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Amy and Jay. Louise, I think you're now going to share some headlines about the Hoo Peninsula, which Medway Council have kindly provided. So over to you, Louise.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and we've also got a little bit from Public Health England, so I'll cover that as well.
Great.
So yeah, just as Amy reflected, there's been a really collaborative approach, and thank you very much to all the projects from my self personally, and that does include Medway Council for the Hoo Peninsula and also Public Health England, both at sort of different stages of development. But just to give you a few headlines, so Medway Council have secured £170 million from the Housing Infrastructure Fund, also known as the HIF, to invest in improving transport and environmental infrastructure on the Hoo Peninsula in the next few years. That is focused significantly on the transport connections, environmental infrastructure, and having these all delivered by 2024. So this includes road improvements, a new railway station. Significant investment will also have been made to create a network of wildlife-rich open spaces, all with extensive walking and cycling routes, new habitats, and a green living bridge over the Peninsula Way, and new wetlands by the estuary. Consultation started in January 2021 and finished in April, and Medway received 827 responses, also 2,200 petitions, and they'll continue to provide ongoing engagement opportunities for residents, land promoters, councillors and MPs, and that consultation was just the start, really. There will be a community engagement report summarising that in the summer of 2021, and they've provided some really useful links, so we'll send that out with the pack and information afterwards, so that everybody's got access to that, and thank you very much to Dan at Medway Council for providing it. Moving on to Public Health England, who for obvious reasons are very busy at the moment, dealing with a pandemic, but as many people may well know, they are actually relocating to Harlow in our geography. So Amy's playing a video here, and I'll just read some key facts for you as she plays that video. And again, we'll share these after the event. And PHE and Medway are very much a key part of our Skills Major Projects group. So Public Health England Harlow will be PHE's future world-leading campus and headquarters. The creation of this new centre of national and international scientific expertise is critical to ensuring PHE can continue protecting and improving the nation's health. This is of particular significance, obviously, at the present time as we face the COVID outbreak. The 40-acre campus will be large enough to co-locate most of PHE's services from Porton, all of those from Colindale, as well as headquarters in central London. A site of this size will allow PHE to bring together a critical mass of scientists and knowledge that will strengthen research potential and the ability to improve and protect public health. So Harlow, Public Health England have noted that Harlow is an ideal location with its long-standing links to science. The Harlow site is positioned next to the town's dedicated enterprise zone, which has a specific focus on the life sciences sector. And I know there'll be things like a visitor centre there as well. The science campus and headquarters will ultimately see up to 2,750 staff based at the site by 2031, following a phased opening from 2025. Scientists and technicians will be the largest group of staff working at PHE Harlow, but there will also be a range of other roles, and they will include things like finance, human resources, communications, marketing, security, maintenance, catering and administration. And with that in mind, PHE are already in conversations with local partners such as the local authorities, schools, colleges and universities to consider the training opportunities and apprenticeships going forward. So that really is just a bit of a whistle-stop tour to give you those headlines, and a future version of one of these I think will invite both Medway Council and PHE to tell you a little bit more I think today's event really is the starting point for us. It's kind of one of the first things we're doing as a skills group for the major projects. And when we've got the report from MACE, that will obviously also give us a really good hook to move forward with. So they're the headlines from PHE and Medway. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Okay, Louise, thank you very much. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. I see that some colleagues have in the Q&A have raised some questions which go a little bit beyond the scope of skills and employment. So we won't be raising those with the panelists who are the skills and employment leads for their projects, but we will be contacting the relevant organisations to see if we can get some answers for you on those matters that don't relate specifically to skills and employment. As I say, we've got 10 minutes or so. So what I'll do is I'll throw out one general question, and I'll invite each of the speakers to give us a minute or so on their response. So the first one is a really obvious one. What do you see as the main challenges and opportunity for skills and employment through your project? So perhaps we'll start in the order that you spoke. So if we go back to who was first, was that? I think yeah, it was Brad. I think it was Bradwell B was first.
Yeah.
So Bradwell, what do you think of the main skills and sort of main opportunities and challenges?
For me, Chris, it's fairly simple. The opportunities are there to be seen from the evidence that Kate talked through around Hinkley Point. I mean, that's opportunities for Essex and the region, and I think for us as an organisation, it's the opportunity to learn from the best of what's been done on the other nuclear projects and what's being done in the region. I mean, in terms of challenges, you know, the skills required to develop and build a project of this nature are so vast and diverse and huge. You know, ultimately, that's the challenge. There's a lot of expectation, of course, that we maximise local opportunities, and thereby, you know, you've got to balance those opportunities. How do we bring those the skills locally to allow them to maximise the opportunities presented to those local people? That would be my sort of view on that.
Huge numbers of jobs that we are coming through your project through quite a considerable period. So it's great.
Kate, would you add anything to that before I finish?
Just very briefly, it's what I said in the presentation. It's timing. Timing is the big challenge. When are we going to need these things? When do we set the pipelines? When the training? When do we actually need the employment?
Thanks, Andrew and Kate. So Lara, over to you from Ebbsfleet. What are your main challenges, do you think, and opportunities?
Yes, I would agree with Andrew and Kate, really. Local residents being given the opportunities and the access to the jobs that are available in the Garden City. That's my prime focus at the moment, and also building those aspirations of young people. You know, the Garden City is going to be in development for until 2035 at least. So it's about making sure young people understand it's not just bricks and mortar. The built environment is much greater than that, and there are huge opportunities for more of the professional services as well as your traditional trades. So we need people who are good with AI, who are good with architectural design, who can look at digital skills, all within the context of construction, whether that is through CAD or 3D design, or whether it is then looking at planning, project management, architecture, all of those more professional services rather than just the traditional skills that young people usually associate construction with. Obviously, we need all of those as well, but it is about creating awareness of what all of the different routes are into the built environment.
Thank you, Lara. So, Robert, in terms of the Freeport, the Freeport East, what do you see as your main opportunities and challenges?
Well, I think in terms of the opportunities, there's probably as broad a range of skills potentially being needed when you think about manufacturing processes, in the case of heat pump manufacturing, chemical gas handling in terms of hydrogen, which is something we don't really have a process plant heritage in our neck of the woods, as well as particularly both the logistics and the design and modelling skills for off-site construction. I mean, both Bradwell and Sizewell are going to be using modular construction for certain elements of their projects. Again, with the port access, it's potential for the port to develop those, but not exclusively those. We don't realise, it could also be, offshore hydrogen generation modules, technologies that we aren't even skilled at, or we don't even know are going to exist in, say, 5, 6, 7 years' time, which again are opportunities for us. So trying to create the aspirations in areas of great deprivation on our patch, I think, is as much as anything creating the aspiration as well as creating the training skills to get the people to take advantage of the jobs.
Thank you, Robert. So turning to Ellie Evans from London Resort. Ellie, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. I think I'll focus on once the resort's operational, because I think that's what differentiates resort from lots of the projects we're talking about today. And from my perspective, the big opportunity is that we will be here to stay and will be a long-term employer of thousands and thousands of people. And I think the opportunity that gives in terms of careers, and that really is the focus, to try and make it be a best-in-class culture for hospitality, where people come and actually they see an entire career with London Resort, and to try and break down and change some of the perceptions of hospitality and leisure industries as something you go into and then leave quickly. So for me, it's that. I think the challenge is potentially what we're finding through all of this engagement is there's loads of really amazing stuff going on at individual schools or individual colleges or in different pockets, and trying to make sure we understand all of that, make the best of it, and have a kind of collaborative approach that takes advantage of all of those things and doesn't miss anybody out.
So thank you, Ellie. And then finally to Amy and Jay.
I was just going to say, from kind of from a short-term and long-term perspective, I think short-term, with everything going on with COVID, I think a lot of people have lost a lot of confidence and lost jobs, and there's been this whole adjustment period. And I think everybody's still trying to navigate around that, including employers. And I think that's quite a challenge for everybody at the moment. I would say longer term is around the kind of the upskilling initiative. So really, we understand there's some skill gaps locally. We want to maximise local opportunities, but those take time to fill those gaps. And it's having those conversations. Our biggest challenge at the moment is having conversations around existing provisions and how we can enhance that, and how we can put things in place and make sure that when these construction programs do start to move forward, we've already kind of minimised as many potential skills gaps as possible.
Thank you. Jay, have you got anything to add? Or
only really following on from Kate's point about the timing of opportunities, really, and for us, like I mentioned before, we're I suppose lucky enough to have a bit of time that if we do get permission to build the projects, we have some time before the major contracts will be let. So we're going to take that time as an opportunity to work with the tier ones and make sure we understand what the timeline of opportunities will be for particular trades and categories, and make sure we can fulfill those needs, be it by recruiting to the SME directory locally or by providing training and upskilling for those opportunities locally.
Thank you. So Richard Dinsdale, do you have any observations on what you've heard today? And when do you think your report will be available?
Well, we're talking about some draft findings that we can share with the project this week. Findings, give us another fortnight and we'll be through everything and have a report in. I kind of say my observation really would be the transition to a net zero economy across the UK, not just the Southeast, is going to change everything. All the old measures are going to go out the window. Cars will not issue particulates. Cars will be net zero. We will absolutely changed the way that workforces deliver things. And we really need to be ready to embrace that. You know, it's not somewhere in the future. You know, 5-6 years time, my 11-year-old will not learn to drive. She won't need to. You know, things are changing, and it's not the old world. The new world is perhaps several years away, no more. Yeah. It has to be. Otherwise, we will not, you know, effectively save the planet. That's, I think, the overarching thing that we have to grasp here and think, how do we help make all of this happen? And then what we need to talk about is how we get access to jobs in an easy way. Brilliant morning. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah. It's funny, I have to chuckle there, Richard, because I have my youngest son is 31 and has never learnt to drive. He lives in the centre of town, and he's never gotten around to it. So maybe he will never have to, even though he's just getting married. Hopefully, will have a family, but in due course. But he hasn't seen the need, living in the centre of town, ever to learn to drive. He must be almost unique, I think. But there we are. Yeah. So anyway, look, I wanted to thank everybody for their presentations and for keeping time so well. I really am very grateful to colleagues for such interesting and informative insights into what's ahead. So I really wanted to thank you for that. That really concludes what we're going to do today. We are going to try, I think, Louise, to answer the questions that people have raised in the Q&A, which and people haven't confined themselves just to skills and employment. So we'll see what we can do about that. The recording of today's events will be available soon on the website, our CELEP main website, and the skills website, and as I said, we'll follow up on the presentations. We'll be sharing the report by Richard that Richard referred to, and we're really looking forward to continuing to work with our major projects. And thanks again for your support and collaboration. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.